Well, retailers the world over are trialing different different varieties of frictionless technology in their stores. And today we're talking about it. We've got a terrific lineup. Frank Beard, welcome to you. You're joining me as co-host today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. This is such a fun topic to talk about.
It really is. It really is. And we've got a terrific panel, Frank, haven't we? Let me just give a bit of a shout out to who's with us today before we get into the program. We've got Jordan Fisher, who's the founder and CEO at Standard Cognition, very much an expert on this. We've got Scott Wu, who's Chief Technology Officer at Compass Digital Labs. I mean, Frank, as you know, Compass are massive, 45 countries, and I think 55,000 retail locations. So, really,
absolutely,
really good global view on this. And then really interesting as well to have the supplier perspective. We've got Jesse Chester, who's category leadership director at Mars, giving us Mars's perspective. And Mars have put a lot of thought into this, as you would expect. And that's going to be pretty interesting. We're going to interview each of them in turn and then bring everybody together for a panel at the end, aren't we, Frank?
Absolutely. And, this is an interesting topic. You had said something on LinkedIn that resonated with me recently, where I believe it was almost verbatim that you've been around retail for many years and autonomous checkout was one of the first things you've seen that truly felt new and exciting. And honestly, I got the same experience when I started visiting autonomous stores. I think everything kind of happened over here around 2017. We saw this, introduction of stores. And I felt the same way so much. I literally went to work for an autonomous company because of that. But I think back to when I worked at a grocery store and, worked there in high school. If you grew up in Iowa, you always somehow end up working at Hy-Vee for a little bit. It's almost like a rite of passage around here. But they'd have me manage the dairy section and I felt proud of that. I like to keep all the products faced, everything in good working order, work with the samples people, make sure we don't have expired food on the shelves, keep things good, all the usual stuff. But you just knew you're going to hear over the intercom at some point, Frank, check, please, Frank. And I swear if I would hear that today, I'd still flinch. It's like burned into me at this point. But when you think back to it, it took me away from my job. I'd have to quit whatever I was doing, go up to the front of the store and run a cash register. And depending on how busy the day was, you might not get things done because of that. And I think what's so cool about this, yes, it's great to eliminate lines. I hate lines just about more than anything. They can even ruin Disney World for me. But you think to the fact people are struggling to hire anyone in their stores right now, quite honestly, in some cases. And when you finally get somebody, you're just sticking them behind a cash register to do something that's capable of being automated. It's like, as this trend keeps growing, I think what we're going to see is a complete refocusing of what employees do in stores. Every retailer is different, but
I'm glad you brought that up, Frank. And it does feel like something massive has shifted here. And just as you mentioned, cash registers, I mean, they've been around a long time, haven't they?
Oh yeah.
In fact, over 140 years, and we just dug this out just before we get into the tech, the high tech pictures. We thought we'd bring in a picture of James Ritty's incorruptible cashier, which is the Mark I, I think, back in Dayton, Ohio, and because we all romantically like to associate anyone from the US as with this era in American history. Shall I say, the horses and so on and the saloons. This was first used in a saloon, wasn't it? Where pure whiskies, fine wines and cigars were being retailed, Frank.
Absolutely. And we still have cash registers today. It's one of those things that you just don't even really question until you realize there's another option. And I think that's also what's so exciting about autonomous checkout. It's one of those things where a lot of people don't even know it's possible, but once they've seen that, then they start questioning, well, wait a second, why isn't this everywhere? This is a way better way to shop.
Well, something big has shifted, as we said. So let's just talk a little bit about a few things that are going on in Europe, and also some of the stuff that a few pictures from stuff that you're seeing in the US or you're doing in the US. Obviously, London is quite important for this increasingly because there's a lot happening in London. Let's just look at one of those retailers who are making some big moves. Amazon Fresh, a couple of pictures from their store. one of their stores, and it's pretty impressive. It's a pretty impressive format. And the thing about Amazon Fresh, they opened one store and everyone got very interested. And then suddenly, in the space of really what seems no time at all, it's probably just a few months, we've got 50, as of yesterday, we've got 15 Amazon Fresh stores in London. They're really starting to build up, aren't they? You know, Frank, it's pretty swift progress.
Absolutely. Yeah. I remember when the first one opened, because it was kind of the same react. All my friends in the UK, I was seeing the same reaction as kind of everyone here had when Amazon Go opened in Seattle. All the same kind of reactions and feedback. And it was kind of interesting to watch that all over again.
And we'll just go through a few pictures, but I think the interesting thing is because London is obviously had been hit very hard by the pandemic, there's a lot of retail space to be had in locations like this, which is at Euston Station in London, you know, and you wouldn't normally have been able to get these locations, you know, but you can right now, you know, at the moment. This will change again, but Amazon are taking advantage of some of the retail space that's available. My impression, of the stores is that the offer is really strong. Even without the technology, the offer is really strong. You know, great food. You know, really good quality offer. Let's just move through a few more pictures quickly. The other thing, of course, is that other operators are responding. This is Tesco's Get Go. Works very similar to Amazon. Interesting thing about it, Frank, is that it's very much the standard Tesco Express store apart from the technology. You know, so they haven't built a different store. They've just put the technology, which looks very much like Amazon's technology, into their Express store. It works through the Tesco Club Card app, just like Amazon. You scan the QR code to get in, and then you just pick up what you want and you leave, and you get the receipt as you shortly after you've left the store. So that's Tesco. Other people are doing it. Sainsbury's is licensing the Amazon technology, which again is really interesting in that they've chosen to go down that route. They call it Smart Shop Pick and Go. It's getting difficult to come up with a new name for this, you know, as every retailer goes into it, you know, and it's interesting to see what retailers come up with. Carrefour decided they should call their version Flash, which I particularly like. This is one of their stores in Paris. I haven't been to this one yet. I'm hoping to go soon. And next, I think we see some activity with ADNOC. This is their ADNOC Go site in Abu Dhabi. This is in an office complex. So there's a lot going on, Frank, and you're doing a few interesting things in the US as well, aren't you?
Yeah, we actually. This photo was just relevant because it was a very recent store opening. In fact, I was just out there, just got home from going out to visit this. This was actually baseball's first autonomous checkout store, which is pretty notable. It's out in Worcester, Mass. It's at Polar Park, which is a new stadium that they just built for the Woo Sox. And it's a beautiful design. It's always nice when you take photos to have a photogenic store. So I was very appreciative of that. But it's a cool experience, though, because, I mean, gosh, we've all been in a sporting venue and you think, okay, I want a beer, I want a snack, whatever it is that you're looking for. And you know, if you get up from your seat, you're going to be greeted with a 10 or 20 minute line. So the ability to walk in, grab and leave is it's nice.
Yeah, and I guess it's particularly interesting, the great looking store, but it's interesting to see obviously a lot of similarities with the convenience store, you know, in terms of some of the product offer. And I guess the difference with this store is that there are no gates at the entrance, Frank.
Yeah, this is much different. With this store, you go in, you shop as you normally would, and then you have the option when you're leaving to just tap your phone against. It's called a checkout station, but it's not really. You're tapping, it's an NFC. You're going to feel your phone vibrate, make a sound, and then you just leave. And it's nice though, because when you think about it, gates are, I was kind of questioning gates. It's like if you went to an e-commerce web or went to a website and you had to create an account before you could even view the inventory, it'd be kind of a weird experience. I'd probably go shop elsewhere. And when you put a gate on a store, it's kind of similar. I remember standing and looking at one store in an airport that had a gate on it. I find these things fascinating, so I try to visit all of them, and kind of like you. And I stood there for 3 hours and nobody used it. They'd walk up, they'd look at the gates and have a discussion and then leave. And I find that really curious. It's a huge source of friction in front of the store. So I don't know. That's what I thought was cool about this one in particular. Go in, shop, tap, and leave. And it's an easy way to get a beer and get back to your seat.
Well, let's get into this, because I think this is a big question. I'm sure we'll come back to the gates issue, which I think is a really interesting discussion. Certainly in the panel later, but let's invite the founder and CEO of Standard Cognition, Jordan Fisher, on to join us, Frank, and just really get into some of this, and maybe Jordan, if we could welcome you on first of all.
How's it going, guys?
Nice to see you, and
thanks for having me on.
Very welcome. Now, perhaps just stepping back a bit, Frank and I've got very overexcited about retail, which is kind of what we do, Frank. But maybe we've got some time to discuss this. So maybe stepping back a bit, Jordan, and just give us a bit of background into Standard AI and what you're doing. Yeah,
absolutely. So we're one of a handful of teams that are tackling this space, the autonomous checkout space. It's a fascinating space. Of course, the original incarnation came from Amazon. They were building out Amazon Go and now JWO and a few other verticals that they're tackling. And I think there's been a bit of a zeitgeist since then, and a few really amazing teams around the world have decided to start building this incredible technology that's going to transform the way that we're all shopping. And we're super excited to be part of it. So if we jump into the next slide, just a quick overview of us. We're really proud to be one of the leading teams in this space. We're of course, now with COVID, this is normal, but we're a globally distributed remote team. So we don't have a picture of all of us, but we're a pretty healthy sized team, and some of us get together occasionally for drinks when it's appropriate. But the inception of the idea was really about convenience, really about making physical shopping the ultimate form of shopping. I mean, we shouldn't have to compromise. You want that immediacy, physicality that real stores can give you, and you don't have to wait in line for 5 minutes. My experience, especially, I'm an urbanite, so I've always lived in big cities, and usually I'm lucky enough to be on top of a grocery store or convenience store, and it'll take me literally 15 seconds to get downstairs and grab a bottle of water, but then I wait in line for 5 minutes, and it really just destroys the whole utility of that store. I think the future of shopping is really stores become our personal pantries. It's so low friction to get in and get out and to grab something that you really just start thinking of it as little local depots of goods that you want. You don't think about it as shopping.
100%. I think it changes everything. I mean, for me, just again, I spent a lot of time in these London stores, and I think you have to experience it to start thinking about how the customer feels, because obviously you're feeling that yourself. And I think what's really sort of inspired me and got me interested in it is it feels very different. It feels like and you can see customers have there's an opportunity for a different character of relationship, I'd say, Jordan, with the retailer, and also for the retailer and the retailer team in the store. It's an opportunity for them too to have a different kind of relationship for the customer. And as you visit these stores over weeks, you can start to see the staff changing how they are a little bit.
I think that's 100% right. It's for me, it's reminiscent of what happened with Uber and Lyft, where you're still transacting, but you take away the sort of machinery of transacting. The transacting happens automatically. You get into a car, you get out. And because of that, because you're not fumbling around for your wallet, you're not thinking about that transaction moment, you get to just have an interaction with the driver. And it's a much more interesting experience. It's a much more human experience. And then ultimately you get out of the car and you go on with your day, and you're never kind of, weighed down by that physicality of having to get out your wallet. And I think same thing's happening with stores, where you walk into a store and now you get to focus on the store, the products, and the experience interacting with the customer service reps inside of the store, which I think is a much better experience for everybody.
It's really different, absolutely. Now, just thinking about, we mentioned this, when we showed this picture a few slides ago with Frank, but you have a unique approach, don't you? With your platform is cameras only and doesn't rely on shelf sensors, which I've got familiar with, or the gates and the turnstiles that Frank and I were just talking about. Why did you decide on taking that path, Jordan?
Yeah, a couple of reasons, but our from the get-go, we knew that we were going to be working with retail partners. We weren't vertically integrating. We weren't building our own stores. We're partnering with great retailers around the world. And what that means is that this has to be a seamless product, not just for shoppers. It's got to be a seamless product for retailers too. And there's a lot more complexity to make that the case, to make this much more white glove. And one of the big important ingredients for us was this has to be minimally disruptive to existing stores. We're not building stores, we're coming into existing stores and transforming them, building this experience on top of it. And what that means is we can't rip out the shelves, we can't change the way that stocking happens inside of the stores. All we can do is put cameras up on the ceiling, which is minimally disruptive. It's, you really barely have to shut the store down. And then we get to deliver this great experience on top of it. And I think that's really key. And then, of course, there's a bunch of other metrics that mean low friction for a retailer. It's got to end up being cheap and easy to roll out, et cetera. But really, that's a core pillar for us, is making this very easy to adopt on the retailer side.
Well, that's just a great point, isn't it? Because as you say, no retailer wants to close the store, rip out all the shelving, and have to put in, new shelving. If it's a low, if it's an easy change to make, it's such a bigger win for the retailer, isn't it?
Exactly. And same thing for gates. And I think we got a couple of slides in the future here, but so that's okay. We can just dump it all on this slide. I think gates are really interesting for a couple of reasons. One, it's, as we said, about the shopper experiences you guys were talking about, it's really antithetical to the whole idea of low friction shopping. We've learned that over and over again in e-commerce. You always put friction at the end. You don't put friction at the beginning. It's just it's kind of a cardinal sin in e-commerce. And I think it's definitely not the right thing to be doing inside of a physical store either. Gate and the friction, if there is any, needs to come at the very end. You want to welcome people into your store, have that great experience, and then let them just walk out. That's key.
Well, that's
yeah.
I definitely like to come back to the gates issue later in the panel. But tell us about what's going on in this little visual.
Yeah. So this is just one of our visualizations, kind of showing what's happening in real time in one of our stores. So this is actually our Market Street store in San Francisco. And the system works completely anonymously. I think it's what's really important to understand. So what the system sees is anonymous people walking through the store, interacting with the store, picking things up. And ultimately, that system then constructs a cart and is able to transact when you bump your phone and give us your payment information. But otherwise, it's a fully anonymous system that's just sort of understanding what's happening inside of the store, which is for us incredibly important.
100%. I mean, I'm very reassured to see that, and I had read about it, but it's nice to see, the visual, I guess, reference for that. Just thinking about the customer experience. Just talk us through. I mean, if I'm a customer, how do I shop one of your stores? Just before we get on to talk about Amazon Go a bit more. What do I have to do?
Yeah. So there's an app. I think this is something that does unify all of the different experiences. So there's an app that we have the standard app, and as long as you have that app, for our experience, at some point in your shopping trip, you bump your phone. There's these little stations. And all you have to do is bump your phone, and that's basically it. You can do it at the beginning of your shopping trip, at the end of your shopping trip. But what's important is that you're already inside the store, so you can be picking up items and then say, "Okay, this is great." You bump your phone and you walk out at that point. But that's really the last minimal piece of friction needed for the shopper, is that single bump.
Got it. So now I was interrupting you, so you carry on, John.
I don't know. We've gone on so many tangents here. I'll talk a little bit about this sort of retailer experience as well that we were touching on real fast. And this is actually the first Amazon Go store that launched in Seattle. And again, kudos to Amazon for trailblazing in this space. But the major differentiation between us and Amazon is, if you go to these stores, you'll see not only is there a ton of cameras up on the ceiling, but there's a lot of sensors throughout the shelves. And really, these are just totally custom, bespoke shelving units. Whereas if you contrast, for example, with the Polar Park store that we just launched, one, there's very few cameras on the ceiling in comparison, so it's a much lighter array of sensors. And then two, there's no sensors on the shelf, so it's really just vision only. And I think it's not just about making it cheaper and easier to deploy; it's also about more flexibility. So one thing you'll notice is there's this table in the middle of that store here, and there's a lot of different ways that you want to sell products. It's not always on a well-structured shelf with dividers between all the units. Sometimes the shelf is messier, sometimes it's in a barrel, sometimes it's on a table. And what's amazing about the vision approach is we're flexible. So whatever way you like to array your SKUs and your products, we support that as long as we can see the products. And for us, that retains the flexibility for the retailer to really present and sell items the way that they want to do so.
No, very good point. Very, very good point. Retailers will certainly like hearing that. Just in terms of, in a way, I suppose what we can all see that this is the future, frankly. In certainly in many retail locations, but I guess the industry is going through a process of refinement where it figures it out at the moment, isn't it, Jordan?
Absolutely.
So if you're a retailer, what are the sort of things you should focus on, and you need to understand, when you're considering this new technology?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's a difference between some of these experiments that we're seeing where it's maybe a new form factor, and you can take this bet and say, well, we're going to put gates up and only allow people to come in if they have an app and a credit card, for example. But if you really want to transform your existing fleet of stores, you have to reach your existing customers, and you have to allow your existing customers to come into the store. In the US, for example, we're still a largely cash-based economy. A huge amount of convenience store transactions happen in cash, and that's not atypical for a lot of different places around the world. So you can't just come in and say, okay, we have thousands of stores, and now suddenly there's gates in front of all the stores, and you have to have a credit card, you have to have an app to come transact here. So what we're doing instead is we're transforming these existing stores and saying, look, come in and shop the way that you already do. Check out the old-fashioned way if you want. We're not forcing you to switch over, but there is this great experience here. So as you're switching over, you get to skip the line, you get to have that great experience. But we're not going to put up that gate and make this a hard transition. So we're really allowing for that smoother transition, which I think is key for transforming, real business lines, real existing fleets of stores, rather than these sort of experiments of new formats.
One question, and that will make a lot of sense to me. One question, Jordan, around theft, and obviously some of the London stores, it's an issue. It's going to be an issue. How does your system cope with that kind of problem for that retailers have?
Yeah. Loss is a huge problem in retail. Of course, our goal is to at least be reducing it over time and giving retailers tools that are going to help them reduce it over time. What's one interesting part of our system is we have these real-time insights as to what's happening in the store. So that visualization that we showed earlier is just one piece of that, but you can piece that together with other things as well. So we know where shoppers are, again, anonymously. We know when they have items, and we can start using that information to empower the employees inside of the store. We can say, hey, we know that there are a few folks who are headed towards the exit that haven't paid, they haven't checked in, they don't have the app. That's a great person to go talk to and have that better experience. They're not stealing yet, so let's go talk to them and explain to them how to get the app, or go check out the old-fashioned way. So it's really, from our perspective, about taking these rich signals that the computer vision system has and using them to not just deliver great experiences to shoppers, but also to the operators in the store. Let's empower them to be able to do their jobs even better.
Makes a lot of sense. Well, Jordan, don't go away. We'll bring you back for a panel at the end. But thanks for joining us. And what we'll do now is let's focus on Compass Group and what they're doing. And perhaps I can invite Scott Wu on, who, as I said before, is the Chief Technology Officer at Compass Digital Labs. Scott, perhaps you could join us.
Hey Dan, how's it going?
Good. Thanks very much for joining us, Scott. Now, just at the start, I mentioned that Compass operate in 45 countries, 55,000 locations, and you've been working in this autonomous area for a while, haven't you?
I have, yeah. So first, yes, most people might not know about Compass because we normally sell through a lot of different other companies. We are in over 45 countries. Our headquarters is in London, UK. I work for a subsidiary called Compass Digital Labs, and Compass really sells through, actually, I'll talk about North America because that's predominantly where I spend my time. We have 28 subsidiary companies that we sell through. So for example, you see Levy's, which is our sports and entertainment division. They do all the sports, stadiums, like the Chicago United Centers. We have Morrison, which is another company that does healthcare. So we're in over 700 hospitals. We do patient feeding and the retail food. We do corporate dining. So, Google, Microsoft, these are some of our clients. And then my role at Compass Digital Labs is really about driving the digital future in food service and food hospitality, right? So I play two roles there. I'm the CTO at Compass Digital Labs. And then recently we've been building a corporate venture capital division. So I'm the managing director there. And part of our focus, Dan, you're right, is on this autonomous checkout. And we've been looking at it for over 4 years now.
Yeah, and so it's in a way. I mean, you've been keeping a little bit quiet about that, Scott, haven't you? In terms of what you've been doing, because obviously we're focusing perhaps on Amazon, particularly because we see the stores. But you've been working on it for quite a long time.
Yeah, I mean, when we first started 4 years ago, it was really nascent. I mean, yes, Amazon was Amazon Go at the beginning, and then Amazon Just Walk Out. We started working with, companies like Standard Cognition. It definitely, we were quiet about it because it was very new and we're trying to get it working in our location. But yeah, over the last 2 years, we've definitely been accelerating. We've opened multiple stores across Compass in the US right now, in a couple of stadiums and in a couple of our university and corporate locations.
It's very impressive. And what if obviously the key question, given that, the time that Compass has spent working in this, what are some of the key learnings that you've picked up, Scott?
So there's a couple. First of all, Jordan talked about, Standard Cognition uses, computer vision only. And, we definitely work with Standard Cognition. We work with a few other, companies as well. There's really two types of companies out there, which is computer vision only. And then the other ones are sensor fusion, which is what you saw with Amazon and a few other companies. And so for us, at the end of the day, what we care about is obviously costs, but, what's the uptime? Because, even when you sometimes providers say, hey, we have 99% of the uptime, but that 1% that they were down, it was at our lunch hour, which is our busiest time. And so the impact's really big. So uptime is really important. Accuracy is really important. Latency, like how fast, does our customer get responses when there's an error, get their receipt. Those things are really important. And, when Jordan talks about computer vision versus sensor fusion, that's really a cost play and complexity play, which definitely impacts us. So we're definitely looking at both. I can talk about some of the advantages that we've learned throughout the last 4 years. So obviously, a computer vision is a very simple solution. It's clean, right? It's just cameras. As an operator, it's a lower cost. I don't have to retrofit all the shelves, all the sensors. I don't have, if something breaks, it's just cameras. It's not cameras and sensors. So it's definitely a cleaner solution. But one of the challenges, for someone like Jordan and his team has to resolve is some of the complexity when you only use one sensor, which is vision. If there's blind spots, if the person's covering up certain items, how do you know exactly how many items is that person taking? So a lot of the problem solving really resides on the company side. With sensor fusion, your cost is a little bit higher. There's more sensors you have to manage. There's more bandwidth because there's more data. But they're covering some of these blind spots, with physical sensors, right? So we're kind of looking at both spaces to see, which one will win. It's kind of like the autonomous driving, Dan. There's two schools of thought. There's, autonomous driving companies that uses LiDAR and vision. And then there's a company like Tesla that only uses vision. So very much in retail is the same thing here right now. We're looking at both areas and seeing which one will work. The other thing that we learn is the difference between retrofitting a store and doing a new build. When there's a new build, Dan, having to install new shelves and sensors, it's fine because you're planning it from the beginning stages. And even putting where to put the cameras, how high the ceiling has to be. When you retrofit, it's different. It's an existing area. So like Jordan says, sometimes with just cameras, it's easier, but other complexities came to play. For example, we don't control the lighting because we're retrofitting. So that creates, more complexity for the solution. And then really it's also educating our operators. There's a new process in place now. Before, when they introduce a new SKU, they add it into their point of sale system. Now there's an added step that you have to train the AI to recognize that product. Right? You have to figure out what type of integrations you need to do now. Like, Jordan talked about, bumping an NFC to check in. So what is that app that they're using? Is that our app? Is it someone else's app? So you really need to start figuring out how do you want your consumer to interact with you? How do you integrate to your your catalog, your product catalog system, your pricing system? So those are things that you have to start considering. And then finally, the last piece is when you go live is how the consumer reacts to this. So like anything when it's new, it's change. And so what we're finding is initially a lot of consumers think they're stealing a lot. They have questions. So I think sometimes the physical gate reminds the consumer that, hey, you're coming into the store and you're exiting the store. In a lot of our location, because we're at our client locations, we can't have a physical gate. So how do you figure out how to educate and communicate with the consumer so that they feel comfortable at the beginning?
Oh, very, very good points. And you can obviously you've picked up some very detailed learnings and all kinds of areas that have to be considered here. Just one question, in terms of the numbers of sites, how many sites do you operate now today, approximately, that are autonomous in the way that we've just been discussing?
Right now, we have about, it keeps growing, Dan. So I think we have about just under 10 right now. But 2022, we're looking to scale that out a lot more significantly. Yeah.
And just so thank you. And just thinking about, the industry as a whole, when do you think, obviously there's a lot of detail to figure out here. So things are moving pretty fast, but it will take time, it will take time. When do you expect to see the industry moving in terms of numbers, large numbers of stores into this technology? When do you think that the sort of tipping point will happen there? I mean, we're obviously not quite there yet.
I think you're starting to see the acceleration now. There's a couple of reasons. One, I think the technology companies are starting to get more mature, like the Amazons, like just walk out, like the standard cognitions. So I think that the technology is starting to get more mature. I think one of the reasons why we haven't scaled out is, one, how accurate is it? How seamless is the product? But the other factor, I think, is cost. I think a lot of these deployment right now there's still a high cost, either for us or for the companies to deploy them. So cost is the other factor. But the thing that's really accelerating through this pandemic is the drive to digital for a lot of retailers, right? Like I can speak for Compass. We have probably grown our digital footprint across our business maybe 5 times, right? Pre-pandemic, you always come to a physical location to eat. During the pandemic, at the beginning, you can only get access to us through mobile, through our web channels. And so one of the things that we're finding now coming out of this pandemic, or we're still in it, but is that we get so much data off our digital channels. We know when, how many people, what's the traffic like on our channels? What's the behavior? What are they looking at? What are they buying? In your physical location, when we go back, you don't know those things most of the time. You don't know what the traffic is. You don't know how many times people come in, there's a lineup, they leave. And so the interesting part about leveraging this technology, the start is the frictionless checkout. But because you have computer vision there, you can start understanding the demographic that's coming into your store, the lineups, where traffic is, what are they looking at? And so really we see, this is at the, computer vision and frictionless autonomous checkout is the first step into this space. But really, how do we start in some ways mimicking our physical location with our digital channels?
No, it's a great point. Look, Scott, I'd like you to come back on the panel, so don't go anywhere. But let's just broaden this a little bit and bring in Jesse Chester and talk about the supplier perspective before we go to the panel. So Jesse, you're obviously you're coming at this from the Mars perspective. You're category leadership director at Mars, and a lot of global experience over the years. We were just talking about the time you spent in the China market before we started this program. So, this is, before we get into the Mars perspective on this is a pretty interesting area for you, Jesse.
Yeah, no, Dan, first, thanks for just inviting me to talk today. This is truly a passion area of mine, right, as we look at the advancement of retail, especially autonomous checkout, right? This is an area that we'll talk a little bit more where right? I think there's massive opportunity, but also as a supplier, there's massive risk to us and retailers, right? As you look at as the shopper fundamentally is changing their own journeys within the store. So it's a truly exciting space.
It is. So just I mean, I think what would be interesting is just stepping back and thinking about Mars and how why you've spent such a lot of time looking at this, and it all becomes, I think, very interesting at that point.
Yeah. So at Mars, so just a little bit about Mars, right? We're one of the largest privately held companies. We've got pet care, we've got confection, and I'm on the confection side of the business. And with that, it's very impulsive business. So,
sure.
We have a key stake in, physical retail. We have a big stake in making sure that experience exists that helps facilitate the shopper's needs around impulse, right? They expect that product, we've trained them over the years, the retailers have trained them over the years that, that product exists at the checkout, or that, that is where I begin to fill these needs. And what's exciting about autonomous checkout is, right, we're shaking it all up, because you don't necessarily have to have those, queuing moments, or those moments of pause as somebody's checking out. But it does, like I mentioned before, it does put some risk into the retailer, right? Impulse products tend to be higher profit. They tend to be more expansive. So basket builders, and the world that we see where there's less traffic, this move online, we've got to get it right. And as you see here, right, we have three fundamental kind of key principles. The first is, right, physical store is going to continue to be king. Right, as you look at, I think it was in 2022, about 75% of global sales were done in physical stores. Even as we look out to 2024, 2025, right, that percentage only drops to 70%. So it's still going to play a massive role. But there are two critical areas that we have to get right. One is the in-store experience. The bar there continues to rise, the expectation of the shopper, as well as from a retailer, how efficient they have to be, right? That bar is getting higher and higher and higher as well. What I see my role in what Mars is tasked category leadership with is pretty simple. Our job is to help create the category growth headspace, working in collaboration with the retailers. So I get to have a little bit different view than maybe what a traditional supplier would have from the sales side. I get to be more collaborative and work with them. And that's where you've seen Mars really make some massive investments around both the collaboration, the partners that we're pulling into the space, because we really want to help be that solution for retailers who are undertaking a change like this, being able to come in with the category expertise, as well as a foundational knowledge of this future technology and how it can impact and be a guide as they look at and putting it into the store.
Yeah, I love those principles, and absolutely the case. Just obviously this is a big area, but tell us some of the learnings that you've got with that unique perspective, Jesse.
Yeah, so as we look at, like I said, we've invested a lot, and we have two key initiatives that we've kicked off in 2020, 2021 that we're going to be moving forward with. One is accelerating the impulse moments, right, and helping the retailers understand, right, how do I get to better in the immediate, but then also working with retailers and companies like Standard Cognition for the longer term on, what does the store of the future look like? How do we really bring to the forefront the shopper's needs, consumers' needs, along with the retailer as well? And if you'll go to the next slide, as we talk about some of the learnings, I think that as we've seen them executed in the marketplace to date, what I would challenge is, if all the retail space is both a merchant and an operator, a lot of times when they're putting in new technology like autonomous checkout, they go from just an operator lens and they forget how important the front end sales are to their business. And you're seeing them go back and doing some remodels afterwards because they may not have been as forward thinking in that area. The second is, along that same vein of, all the research that we continue to do, shoppers love the convenience of being able to check out, but they also want to find the product that they can in their store.
Sure.
Right. Nothing is more frustrating than, yes, I have to go buy, a cart worth of product, but I want my Snickers at the end of the day, or I want my Coke as a refreshment, and it's not there. So how do we help, change the front end of the store? I do think that over the next couple of years, it will change dramatically, but we still need to put in those opportunities for those moments, right? That the shopper really wants to be able to fulfill the needs that they have. And then, the last thing is, right, we don't have the solutions yet. We're actively working on them. We're actively collaborating with partners. But what we've seen is that when we talk about conversion, right, for impulse categories, right, the thing that converts the best is still a manned checkout. And we know that it won't go away completely, but it needs to evolve significantly, right, as we move towards this frictionless checkout. So there are still the solutions that need to be created, need to be invented. And that's, again, where I have a lot of passion in this space of ambiguity of what does that look like for the front, right? The checkouts will change, the approach zone, which is, as you're moving towards the checkout, right? That becomes even more critical on how a retailer looks at it and what they're putting there and the items that they put there. And I think the retailers that make this change successfully, right? They will succeed. And those that don't or wait too long, I think they're going to struggle in the coming world.
And I guess one lesson that we've learned from the pandemic, Jesse, is that acceleration, isn't it? In terms of implementation, suddenly things are happening very quickly. So I guess it's pretty crucial for to take this wider view of doing, making the right decisions as these things get accelerated.
Yeah, I think it's about moving fast, but about moving fast in the right way. Which is the challenge that we face when we're going into the unknown. And again, that's where Mars is really stepping up to help be that partner with retailers to help them get through this time of significant change.
Great. Well, look, my last question to you was going to see, what will the next 5 years, where will the next 5 years get us? And then perhaps we can bring the rest of the panel in to get their take on that one as well.
Yeah, I think over the next 5 years, as we look at the store of the future, right, it's going to be two things. One, real-time relevant. How do you continue to make your store more relevant? Because it's about store traffic, right? Yeah. Traffic is sales. Sales is, right? And sales is profit. Profit means reinvestment. So how do, and this is the role that Mars can play, right? With the big brands that we have to help drive that engagement. And that engagement may be, whether it's gamification type things in store and interacting with the brand, or even as retailers look at the key categories that can help them drive, right? So the destination categories or categories with a lot of excitement and engagement and, expansion that are involved, right? How do they lean in those to help drive that footfall, help drive that sales? But at the same time, right, it's going to be about creating a better experience for the shopper, while at the same time continuing to reduce your cost, right? That is the world that we play in now, and the world that we live in. So it's going to be a dichotomy of that. And where I'm excited about this autonomous retail, it allows retailers to begin to shift their labor model to areas that can drive even more value for the shopper. And as we talk about where I see technology going over the next couple of years, we're going to continue to move towards seamless. The pace, I think, will be faster than what we expect. But at the same time, the value of this type of technology, especially like Standard has, that isn't necessarily the weighted shelves, or it's as they move towards the camera base, but just think of all of the insights that you can get there. Truly, what is the shopper journey through the store? How do we continue to elevate that experience? What are the products that they're looking at? Even as they go through the journey and being able to pinpoint that. There were great strides made over the past couple decades on category management and adjacencies and the shopper pass. But I think you will see another step change as we're really able to tie that even more closely.
No, it makes perfect sense. Let's bring in Scott.
Perfect.
And Jordan, just as we get into towards the end of this, just thinking about some of the points that Jesse made, Scott and Jordan. Any obviously the retailers are moving quickly, but it's a complicated process, isn't it? That has to be considered in terms of obviously the impulse opportunity is massive in the convenience sector.
Yeah. I mean, on the retail, like for us, there's a couple of drivers we talked about. I mean, it's always about the consumer experience. It's how do you remove friction? But funny enough, through this pandemic, we have a labor shortage. So this is actually solving a problem for us too. Like we just can't find enough people. And then the third piece for us is we actually spend a lot of money designing and building our spaces. And you spend all this money designing the spaces, and then all of a sudden you have these point of sales or kiosk, right? And I think Apple is one of the first retailers. If you go to that space, they've hidden all their point of sales location, right? And so what we're seeing with autonomous checkout is, like you won't see these devices in some time down the line, right? And the way people interact, like Jesse said, the flow of traffic in your stores will be different because traffic is ultimately what drives sales, right? So this is why we're really excited to move in this area right now. And then I think the last piece Jesse mentioned as well is really the shift of the type of roles, right? Like we are a service organization. We're trying to provide a certain experience. Point of sale is a transactional, right? When you have someone at a cashier, that's a transactional task. How do we move those roles into driving an experience for our consumers?
I think that's just such a great point. Jordan, let's just focus in on experience. This is an opportunity, isn't it, for the retailer?
Yeah, 100%. I agree with everything Scott and Jesse are saying here. I think that the technology is fundamentally about enabling retailers to deliver the experience that they want, and providers and CPGs too, right? So ultimately, we're taking the machine out of the way between the shopper and the experience that they want. We're also freeing up the store to reorient itself. What do you want to do with that front of the store? How do you want to drive conversions? And suddenly you just have flexibility. We're also giving that tool to then do better optimization, as Jesse was saying. One thing I think about a lot is I'm a mathematician, so I geek out on this kind of stuff, but how do you know what the shopper wants? So you can look at the point of sale system and say, okay, well, they're buying, XYZ, so let's buy more of that. But that's assuming from a statistical perspective that every product in the store is on equal footing. There could be other biases as to why that product is selling and something else isn't. For example, maybe another product is out of stock, or maybe it's in a part of the store that's not getting foot traffic. And what's awesome about our system, or systems like ours, is suddenly we know exactly where people are in the store. So I can tell you when there is that visual impression, and I can tell you when that product was out of stock. So we can start correcting for those statistical biases and getting a much better level set across the SKUs in the store, which ultimately should be better, not just for the retailers and the CPGs, but it should be better for the shopper too, because we're going to be able to drive a better selection for them and give them better value when they come to that store.
And that empowers you in category management, Jesse.
No, it does. I mean, I laugh as we're doing this. One of the most frustrating things for us is, we help design the best set, the most optimum set, and you put it in, and it never gets either executed at the retail level, or you're seeing a lot of store labor issues, right? We're having now where the product's just out of stock, or it could be in the back, right? It's in stock in the store but not on the shelf, and that doesn't help the shopper at all. And where this technology, where this can go is, much more intentional labor kind of direction, right? In time or on time labor direction. And then from a company standpoint or supplier standpoint, being able to get, again, some of that data back on how's the shopper looking at it? Where are they looking at it? What are the best areas, right? It will unlock, I think, a better discussion between the suppliers and the retailers on the roles that each of us play within our businesses.
No, they're very good. I mean, just one final point from me on the labor issue. My observation visiting a lot of the stores that I showed in London at the start is that I felt in a way that the store staff were enjoying their jobs more. Now you can hypothesize why that is, and I think it's interesting to think about that. We haven't got time now, but if they are enjoying their jobs more, and there's in a way less confrontation with the customer, it's a much less confrontational kind of relationship. It's almost that you're both aligned together and you're both getting stuff done to help each other. And it's a different kind of relationship, given the labor issues that CEOs around the industry are really concerned about, particularly in inner city stores. This is a big opportunity. This is quite an important shift, isn't it? I
do think as we're talking about labor in the checkout, right, we've seen the the preference for manned checkout, right, is going down as whether it's self-checkout, self-scan, some of this autonomous is coming on, but the need for that still will exist, but it'll just be in a much smaller way. And again, it'll help the retailers reorganize their front end to optimize, right? How much do I need of each? Because if you do it right, it frees up more retail space. And in categories like confection and treats and snacks and the rest of the store as well, it's about assortment and availability in store. I think Jordan talked about it earlier when he went down and got the water. How frustrated would he be if the water wasn't there? So the more space that we can free up for both assortment and ensuring in stock, the better the retailer is going to be.
No, I think that's a great point.
Yeah, Dan, just to add to what Jesse said, we all go to restaurants before the pandemic, but when you go to a restaurant, when you come out, you have a great experience. A lot of time you have a great experience, obviously because the food's great, but it's because the person that's serving you has done a great job explaining what you can eat, what the new specials are, what ingredients are really fresh. But the funny thing is, you always see them running away to pick up a check, right? They have to get the cash. They have to fulfill the payment. Now imagine you remove that away, and their whole focus now is to drive a better experience. But from a retailer perspective, they're probably cross-selling and upselling. So they're focusing energy not on the transactions, but on the experience and driving more sales.
I 100% agree with you. And this is, I guess, the bit as someone who's spent a lot of time in retail, I think this is the bit that really excited me in terms of the potential for this, and obviously there's all kinds of things that are interesting for retailers, but I think the experience is a key thing that our industry's got to deliver, to stay relevant to the customer. So it's just a fascinating discussion. We could talk about this all day. We've had 50 minutes, and I think, guys, you've done a terrific job. So look, we're going to come back to this on Shop Talk Live again in 2022, the rest of this year in 2022. We've made a great start. Jesse, thank you very much for sharing Mars's perspective. Scott, really appreciate you bringing the sort of 4 years you've been working on this and learning at Compass. And Jordan, good luck. You're really doing some fabulous things with your technology to help retailers. So congratulations on that, and thanks for sharing today.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on. And I think excited to keep rolling out this tech. Really partnering with folks like Scott and folks like Jesse, and it's really the early adopters here, not just on the shopper side, but I think on the retailer and CPG side, that's helping us figure out what does this need to look like. How do we really get this in front of shoppers and make this super successful? And it's the devil's in the details. So it's been a fun couple of years, but really excited for the next couple of years where we get to start really ramping this up and delivering it to shoppers everywhere.
Well, there's lots to look forward to. Thanks very much, guys. We really appreciate you joining us on Shop Talk Live.